Hello and welcome. Before we meet this week's guest, I just want to take a moment to recommend a really inspiring book for anyone who struggles with making important decisions. It's called The Necktie and the Jaguar, and it's by retired clinical psychologist, Jungian analyst, and shamanic practitioner Carl Greer. In addition to revealing how he tapped into the wisdom and the power of unseen worlds for guidance and inspiration, Carl's fascinating memoir offers some valuable keys and questions that inspire the kind of thinking that guides you effortlessly on your own path to transformation. So take a tip, check it out for yourself at carlgreer.com. And now, joining me today to share the stories behind the 10 books that influenced her the most on her life journey is a writer, author, and mystic whose website name, universeofdeliciousness.com, conjures up all sorts of luscious and possibly even forbidden delights. A facilitator at Skyros and a transformational speaker at Mind, Body, Spirit, World Spirituality, Conscious Cafe, and many other well-being forums, Julia's professional expertise combines Grinberg bodywork, cranial sacral therapy, family constellations, and Kashmiri Tantra. And she's the author of The Healing Power of Pleasure, 7 Medicines for Rediscovering the Innate Joy of Being. And as you might imagine, she's passionate about sharing her lifelong love of the life of the body, real sensual relationship, and the mystery. Julia Paulette Hollenbery, welcome.
Hello, Sandie.
Good to have you with us.
Thanks, good to be with you again.
So, before we start talking about the 10 books which had the most influence on your spiritual growth and your life path, explain to me what you mean by the mystery.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's really kind of difficult to put it into words. At least for me, it's been difficult to put into words because it was so much felt. It is really the everything. It's the water that we swim in. And it's here all the time.
You're swimming in it now, aren't you?
Well, it really is here all the time. It is. And that's the thing, right? That's the thing, is that it is loving us, supporting us, with us, close to us. It's not even an it, right? It's kind of, it just is.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty decent attempt at explaining the unexplainable and the ineffable. So tell us about books, because you said that books saved your life as a child. Why was that?
You know, this morning I was tuning in to these 10 books and I really began crying, and I was completely taken aback by that. And immediately comes to mind the Ice Queen. And I think that as a child, when I didn't have the words or the paragraphs to express myself, and I wasn't confident that there was somebody on the other side who could comprehend my experiences, books were a solace, books were a safe place where something of what I was experiencing was there, and I felt accompanied and not alone. And there's this in the Ice Queen, there's this description of the girl in this ice cavern, and she is trying to fit together the pieces of the ice into a jigsaw, and she'd lost her friend. And there was something about this image, this metaphor, that spoke to me, that in some, to use your word, ineffable way, was a recognition of some of my experience. And of course there were other things, you know, other books, many other descriptions and worlds.
Yeah. Well, the first book on your list, and you have given us your list in a kind of chronological order and shared, what was happening for you at the time as well. But your first book is described as offering a compelling vision of a new reality, a reconciliation of science and the human spirit for a future that will work. And the book, of course, is The Turning Point, Science, Society and the Rising Culture by Fridtjof Capra, published in 1982. So tell us when you came across this book. Must have been quite young.
I was a teenager and I was feeling quite lost. An awful lot had been going on in my world. My grandma and my mum had been unwell and my grandpa died. And my mum also was on her own healing journey. And she was exploring and discovering all these things. And I can remember the cover of the book. It was white and shiny. And I don't remember now if I picked it up or she gave it to me. But it was a proper, serious explanation of the world in a way that kind of subtly made me feel as if there were walls around me. It kind of made sense of the world in a completely new way.
When you say walls, do you mean like stability?
Yeah, it was like, this is the way that things are, in a very subtle way. And that was really reassuring.
It's interesting because I haven't read the book, but I saw on Goodreads that someone had wrote that reading and summarising the book is an academic course in my MBA. And honestly, I'm facing a problem in reading it. I don't know how to start, how to divide it, and how to be interested during reading it. So you were a teenager, and from what I've read about this book, it's not an easy book to read, and yet it touched you very deeply, made a big impact.
It did, and perhaps it is the complexity, the detail, the fine detail that I appreciated, as well as this kind of making sense of the world. So I've still got most of these books, and I've got them with me right now. This is the Tao of Physics, which is not the same book, but by the same author.
Yeah.
And I think it was revelatory and utterly compelling, the detail, and there was something about the definiteness of what he was writing about. So I have a sense as I'm talking to you of, ordinary home life and ordinary school life and just, ordinary stuff. And here was this book that was huge, right? It lay out a huge landscape, and that was thrilling.
Gave you sounds like a real perceptual shift at a time that opened up something much bigger than you could have imagined to you.
Well, I was 18 when actually I had my first breakdown, and this book is called The Turning Point. And in some way there was a turning point of realizing that there is people and language and methodologies even, but it's just something to do with the vastness, these walls that are out here, these subtle walls of the way that the world really is, beyond, the petty details of I don't know what.
You mentioned the word breakdown. It sounds more like a breakthrough to me.
Well, with hindsight, and we can, I remember at the time or afterwards, because I cried an awful lot, for a while, and I don't think I had cried until then. I think I had tried to be strong, and I tried to look after lots of other people, my grandma, my mum, other people in my family, and I think it was, after a while, a breakthrough to more authentic, real, honest, not knowing.
And such an interesting age too.
I walked a lot in nature. That really helped. And I don't know if you want me to speak to it, but I had gone away to university, and I remember on my way back, there was practically a conscious choice to give up, to allow things in my visual field to go blurry, to not cope. I remember being really clear that I can't keep looking after everybody else anymore. And I'm smiling. I don't know what else to say in this moment, but
That's okay.
yes.
Clearly, it had a massive, massive impact on you. And that's why it's number one on the list and the first one. Let's move on to book 2, The Spell of the Sensuous, Perception and Language in a More Than Human World by David Abram, published in 1996.
But number 2 in my story.
Number 2 in your story.
Is actually The Wisdom of Insecurity. So I can go...
So why do we not have that? Did you give us 11 by any chance? No, I've got The Wisdom of Insecurity down as number 5. Never mind. Let's take this as in its chronology. Tell us about The Wisdom of Insecurity, A Message for an Age of Anxiety by Alan Watts.
So my mum, who was a physiotherapist and also exploring all sorts of other modalities for herself, like craniosacral therapy, took me to see an osteopath as I was moving through this time of change. And he looked at me, and I felt, understood where I was. And he recommended this book to me, The Wisdom of Insecurity, which is here. You see, they're all treasured friends for decades, much read. And, you know, the smell of books, right? And this book told me that even if I didn't know what was going on with me at that time, I was okay. This book reminded me, and again spoke in a language that I'd never heard before this. This book said it's okay not to know. I mean, you must have heard it so many times on your program.
This book, no. It's never appeared before on anybody's list.
Wow, The Wisdom of Insecurity. I remember Robert looked at me with such kindness as he recommended this book to me. And as I read it, it just said, it's okay. It was like, it's okay to be human. It's okay to be fragile. It's okay to be delicate. It's okay not to know. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to find your way. And I was grateful. I still am grateful.
Yeah. The book I read is The Wisdom of Insecurity underlines the importance of our search for stability in an age where human life seems particularly vulnerable and uncertain. Could have been written for today, couldn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Watts argues our insecurity is the consequence of trying to be secure. Right. And that ironically, salvation and sanity lie in the recognition that we have no way of saving ourselves.
And in giving up trying to get it right, in giving up trying to please others, in giving up trying to present myself in how I thought I was supposed to be, I found something else, and I love not knowing. Well, you asked earlier about the mystery, right? So not
Yeah.
knowing is part of the mystery, right? You don't know and you find something arrives, and it's it's not security from this is who I am and this is what I do and this is how I dress. It's the security of being in touch with whatever is, and that moves and changes and brings us and to those around us the information that we need, or the people or the places that we need. It's moving and dynamic.
Yeah. So tell us which title was number 3 on your list?
What have you got as number 3? I've got my books here.
I've got Jonathan Livingston's Seagull by Richard Bach.
Right.
You were 19.
That's right. That's right. I think I emailed you this morning with the order to confirm that for you. So, yes, Jonathan Livingston's Seagull was given to me by a friend at university when I was new at university. And she spoke in a language that I hadn't heard before. She talked about positivity and negativity and good and evil, and it was like so clear. And she gave me this book. And as you know, this book is very, very simple. And in its simplicity and in its space and spaciousness, it invited me into that spaciousness and the possibility of freedom, and like all these great truths and truthfulnesses is recognizable even if not fully understood, right? And I've just bought the book actually for my daughter who's 11, and it's sitting by the side of her bed waiting for when she's ready to read this book. And at the time I dived into all the rest of Richard Bach's books, The Messiah, and there's one about relationships and love, and well, they all shine with hope and possibility and the sense of, I guess, a golden thread that goes through a life. And again, I'm deeply grateful.
Yeah.
For all those books.
Book number 4, Quartets by T.S. Eliot.
Gosh, all the books on my list are so different from each other, so different. So I passionately love my copy of the 4 Quartets, and all I could find of it is the back cover. And I scribbled, my copy has so much of my notes alongside it. So this was I studied English literature, and this is one of my course books. And again, a completely different voice and structure and way of presenting the material than all the other books, right? But the profundity was clear. The invitation to all those magical moments under the apple tree, in the garden, under the waterfall. I mean, I used to know it practically off by heart. And I remember as a treat once, a friend of mine invited me to read the whole thing to her. And with delight, I read the whole of the 4 Quartets to her, because it is so poetic and it takes one on this journey. And even if I didn't rationally comprehend everything, because the language is dense and it's full of imagery, again, the recognition of something was clear. There's big images and there's small images, the bells. I mean, in the stillness between two waves, a condition of complete simplicity, costing no less than everything, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, and the rose and the something will be one. And I passionately love this text. And again, I can't tell you why, I just do.
Speaks to you, obviously, on a very deep level. So book number 6 is The Quantum Self, Human Nature and Consciousness Defined by the New Physics, Dana Zohar.
Okay.
Nice cover.
Yeah. Different than the ones you have, of course. Each edition is different. So after university and some jobs, I went to live abroad. I went to live in Israel. I wanted a lot more space. And I began to study there also bodywork method, and I had a number of jobs in high-tech companies, and one of my jobs was in the University of Tel Aviv, helping a professor of biochemistry organize a biochemistry conference. And I loved spending time in the huge library at Tel Aviv, and this book literally fell off the shelf onto my head, and I read it again. I consumed it with delight, and she has just smelling the book, it's so old. She has, of course, The Quantum Self and The Quantum Society, and these books make sense in a different way yet again of philosophy and spirituality and self and the world. And I remember discovering that my mum also had the same 2 books on her shelves. And not that long ago, as I'm now in this process of promoting my book, and somebody introduced me to Dana Zohar virtually. I haven't actually met her. And I was so thrilled and so excited because, yeah, she feels like her books feel like a major influence. I really love the quantum perspective. And I told her about being on this show as well earlier today. I messaged her to let her know.
You told her that her book is one of your 10 best.
I did.
Good. I'm sure an author loves to hear that. Yeah. Okay, so book number 7 is a historic and influential work that's considered by many to be a primer of mystical thought. And obviously it's influenced many great thinkers and writers. And it is In Search of the Miraculous by Spensky.
See, I love all of them. They're all favourite friends, right? I'd been living in Israel for a number of years, and then I went on a big journey to India. And while I was in India, and it was clearly a spiritual search, I set off to find something. And while I was there at one of the ashrams, I was introduced to the Gurdjieff movements. Loved them. And while I was traveling in Nepal, also made the decision to come back and live in England. And I wanted to, so I searched for a Gurdjieff group. And I found one in central London. And I'm still in touch with students and my teacher from there. And this book, which I think I read before I found the group and continued reading, all of these books I've read many, many times. Well, again, it shows a different view of reality. And it's absolutely compelling with all its diagrams about the planets and the inside of the body, the energy centers, and I guess the realness of the transmission of this book and of that group that was very, and still is, even though I haven't been a part of it for quite a long time. It was real. It was my first meeting of a real spiritual teacher, real people, real students to accompany me, to be together with. And we would have our regular meetings. And I felt seen by the teachers and I felt challenged by the teachers. And we would also spend time gardening, allotmenting, cooking together, practicing presence. And I'm very grateful and still love my teachers from there.
So now we'll go back to the one that I had down as number 2, which was The Spell of the Sensuous, Perception and Language in a Modern Human World, David Abraham.
So this book brings the vividness, the aliveness of life. Another book, that makes perfect sense, bringing the livingness of everything, of the animals and the earth and the plants and the sounds and the connection and the interrelationships between everything, and his use of language that conjures and evokes the literal aliveness and interconnected and I can't find enough of a word for the interconnectionness between everything. When I was much younger, there was a painting at my maternal grandparents' house. There was a painting of a tree, and my maternal grandparents were also spiritual seekers. They were part of a Subud group. And this picture of a tree fascinated me. I would stare at it, and I felt woken up by this picture of the tree. I don't know if somebody perhaps from their lineage painted it, and I for a while was resentful that the picture of the tree woke me up instead of me having been enough awake to really see the nature. I don't know how else to describe it, but something similar. This book woke and stirred in me something to do with the language and the earth, and again the relationships between things. It makes me, they're all such favorite friends.
You obviously have a very visceral relationship with books. You feel them, don't you?
Doesn't everybody? Aren't they locations where you
I don't know that everybody feels that way. I mean, for many, it's an intellectual endeavour. And the relationship with them, I would think, for those people is quite different. I mean, certainly this book, the description of it, it's described as an intellectual tour de force that returns us to our senses and to the sensuous terrain that sustains us. Exactly. Major work of ecological philosophy startles the senses out of habitual ways of perception.
That's what I was trying to describe with this picture and with this book. Yeah. Exactly that.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
It's a visceral wake-up call.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to check that one out. So the next book, Mary Magdalene, Beloved Disciple by Christa Kintzler. And this was published in 1989. And there have been a number of books about the Magdalene that have been recommended by people, but they're all different.
So my own life story moves on, right? By now, I was in a full of love, but really turbulent relationship with my daughter's dad, and he gave me this book, and he told me that he knew that it was for me. And I found within it, well, people talk about the sacred prostitutes of the ancient temples, and the word prostitute is a difficult word, I think, in modernity. It is difficult. And I think many women, I certainly, have a sense of having been one of those ancient priestesses in the ancient temples serving, and this book describes so beautifully the life. I particularly remember the descriptions of the snakes and how the priestesses would journey with the venom. It is clear their integrity, love and sacredness, and the final lines of the book is life. Oh no, I think I'm saying it wrong in my excitement. I think it is, I remember it as life loves life. And I just rang to this. It was, I know this absolutely viscerally. This is what I know. This is what is. It's a message that is bigger than the story.
Yeah. Well, the description is that this is a powerful tale told through Mary's eyes, which blends together illuminating insights into the sacred marriage, the ritual reenactment of the story of Isis and Osiris, and the mysteries of the goddess worship. No mere repentant sinner, Mary is portrayed as the tower of her people and the chosen representative of the goddess Earth.
Right.
Which probably sums it up very, very well.
It's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah. So now, number 9 is a book that seeks answers to the question, is there a mystical consciousness, particularly natural to women? And if so, what role is it playing in the spiritual evolution of our world? And the book is The Unknown She, 8 Faces of an Emerging Consciousness by Hilary Hart.
So, I was, in those years of being back in England, I spent a lot of time sitting with different spiritual teachers. And one of them was Llewellyn Vaughan Lee of Sufi Path. And there were quite a few others. And this book is written from one of his students who is also a teacher. And I love this book for its evocation of a feminine spirituality that is full of earthy, practical relationship details and is not heady and intellectual and disconnected. And it describes the different women, and each of them are living it in a very different way. And as I went on, at one point I wanted to join a women's group connected to this tradition. And Jackie Crevetto, the woman leading the women's group, wanted to visit me, and she came here and visited me and my baby. And I'd read this book years before, right? Years before that. And I remember recognizing and suddenly going, I know who you are. And she hadn't said anything. I know who you are. You're the woman from that book. And that was thrilling, that the transmission, that feminine, her particular, and I'm still in contact with her. She was one of the people who was kind enough to look at an early draft of my book, and Oh, look, my goodness, how's that? I opened the book and by absolute chance, it's at a picture of her. So there's magic around, and kind of really inspiring to see to read these different kinds of women, feminine ways of, unconventional ways of living it, quietly, many of them. And for a while, I thought I wanted to teach Hilary's work. I met Hilary. I went to a workshop with her at St Ethelburga's in central London. And of course, Hilary has written other books. The Body of Wisdom is also here. And she writes so much about embodiment, the real physicalityness, again, the sensuality and the physicality and the earthiness, the living of spirit in this inclusive, feminine, relational, intimate ways.
She actually travelled the world meeting with contemporary mystics, apparently from a variety of traditions, including Lakota Sioux, Sufism, Buddhism, West African shamanism. Yeah, sounds like a fascinating book. Another one to add to my list.
It's, yeah, recommended.
Okay, so book number 10 is, will be no surprise by now, the title of this one, Desire, the Tantric Path to Awakening, Daniel Odier.
So a friend suggested this book to me, and I remember reading it, and it was like water, and perhaps all the best spiritual books are like that. You know, I read it and I was kind of like, this isn't new to me. I know this. I absolutely know this. I don't, you know, I already know all of this. So this book is fundamentally, yet again, but in a different way, about the passionate relationship between the elements of the world, between, you know, as they say, you know, your foot wants to feel the carpet underneath it, and the carpet wants to feel your foot. This, you know, deeply erotic, sensual, lusty desire in everything, this intelligence, this wisdom, this wish for connection and relationship in everything. And this book is published by Inner Traditions, and I don't know if it's appropriate to share here. I'd like to, a little bit about the story of how my book came to be published, which is published by the same
company.
Yeah, and it is, of course, humbling for me that my book is being published amongst, you know, when I first opened their catalogue and saw all these greats. But what I wanted to share about that was the way that I came to meet Sabine was absolutely on this clear guidance, this clear energy that prompted me. I remember at the beginning of that day a particular excitement and needing to be very attuned to following it and to speaking to this person and to talking to this person, even if it felt that the conversation was finished, and then my body took me exactly to the right place. And I think I've heard it's unusual for people without an agent or not particularly priorly known to be published. So I feel exceedingly grateful.
Where did you meet
and
Sabine?
Carried on the wings of the good right energy. I met Sabine at the London Book Fair.
Okay.
And it's this vast, someone had said to me, go and talk to a person at this stall, you know, row this, and
yeah.
and I couldn't have found it with my head. honestly, it's vast and confusing. And yet my body stopped at a certain point and I looked up and I was exactly right in front of her table. And we had an immediate spark. So
tell us what your book is about.
Well, my book is about the threads that are in all of these books, and I think all of them are referenced at the back.
The healing power of pleasure.
My book is about the fullest or the full or the big or the huge possibility that there is for each of us to live individually and collectively. It is about the intelligence, sensitivity, wisdom that is in all of us and in everything. It's practical about creating good relationships and communication and intimacy and delight. It's about breaking through the conditioning that keeps us small and in our heads and anxious and seeking security, to pick up some of the threads from our conversation, and I hope leads people into greater freedom and authentic connection with their bodies and their hearts and the richness that is possible in all of these relationships, as all these other writers have known and expressed in their way. I have found my way to transmit this message or invitation that I think we need.
Well, I would say that pleasure is something that appears to be in short supply in many people's lives right now.
It's a difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
And yet, even within the difficulty, it is possible to find even the littlest bit of pleasure. And that's real and alive and makes everything worthwhile.
For sure. What are you reading now?
I don't know what I'm reading at the moment. I've got a bunch of books by the side of my bed. I dip into them. One of them is by Elizabeth Gilbert, The City of Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is by Dr. Laurie Mintz, Becoming Clitorate. And
Clever title.
It's also a good read.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some others there. And it's been very touching journeying through all of these different books, these milestones, these...
It couldn't have been that difficult for you to compile your list because you'd already referenced them very recently in your own book. But were you inclined to go back and reread some of them? And did you find anything new that you'd missed before?
Well, I mean, I've got lots and lots of books here. I mean, my book references 200 books. So, and yet when I did that process, the invitation to write your 10 best books, and it was clear which ones they were, to my surprise, even though I've got, books from so many teachers here and so many rich and good books. I haven't, I've read these books so many times. I haven't, but it's been a pleasure today putting them out and literally touching them with my hands and remembering my good friends and how important they were, how important they still are.
Do you regard them all as kind of stepping stones along your path? Or guide guideposts?
They helped. They really helped. They really, really helped. And again, it's amazing to think that someone else may pick up my book, and it may, I hope, be a good, big...
Have you had lots of feedback?
I've had
Reader
quite a
feedback,
bit.
even.
I've had, I mean, it's I've had a little, not loads, because it hasn't yet come out in England. It's come out in America, and it's an audiobook, and I have had some really lovely surprise messages from readers, and that's been delightful, very touching.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Oh dear. I'm just feeling, the great circle of life. And my mum wrote a book that didn't get brought to publication, and my dad used to write. He used to write television scripts and all sorts of different things. And it's just very, very touching to see all these people, right? All these people have written. All these people have felt passionate enough to bother to write a book. And we know how much work goes into that. They've bothered to want to reach out to people, to help people. And I guess
Everybody
there are
has a
thousands.
story. Everyone has a story
Everyone has
that they
a story.
want to tell. And it's a shame that more people don't.
And everybody's doing their best. The thousands upon thousands of people that are engaged in spiritual work in their, many, many different ways across history and geography. It's hugely touching. And yeah. And it's
so what are you doing now that the book is finished and published? Are you already planning the next one, or are you enjoying, the satisfaction of having completed the first one?
I think, well, I'm writing quite a few articles, continuing to spread in smaller ways the message. I'm planning to teach what's in the book, and that will probably be next year. I have already been teaching it as a small workshop, and I'm planning to teach it as a bigger, more immersive, in-depth workshop.
So is this online?
What I've done so far has been online, and I guess we'll all see how the world will be. I would absolutely love for us to meet in person next year. So I'm not sure yet.
What's the workshops about? I mean, you're talking about the book. What have you called them?
The shorter workshop I've called so far, or it has been called so far, Power of Pleasure, Ancient Teachings for a Happier Life. And the in-depth journey is Joy of Being. It's very touching in this moment, the number of people who want to make the world a better place, who have hope, who have determination, who care, who want to improve themselves and the earth and contribute to making a better world for us all.
Yeah, and we need to remember that and appreciate it, because there's an awful lot of effort going in to make us feel that the world is going to hell in a handbasket.
The children are happy enough, though. Without the stories, the children are doing their thing.
Yeah. So are these workshops already up on your website, and can people sign up for them now?
I'm in the process of doing that. There's something written on my website, but probably the newsletter, which I call Hints of Deliciousness, is the place to sign up right now. I think 2022 is going to be an interesting year. It's definitely about embodiment and pleasure and joy and happiness and potential and living our lives.
How did you come up with the name of your website, universeofdeliciousness.com? What do people expect to find there?
Well, as you know, my whole book is written about the universe of deliciousness, and that was its original working title. And that phrase came when I was invited to give a talk, this is quite a few years ago, about instinctual intelligence. And that phrase was part of what I wrote when I was inviting people into this delicious, delightful, sensitive, subtle, spiritual realm that is possible, and that so many of the mystics and authors and teachers that have gone before have lived and told us about. And I don't think I know it's not far away. It is actually right here. We've talked before about the 7 medicines. It is absolutely possible to interrupt the stress and the anxiety and the trying hard, and to drop into the deliciousness of you and me and life. So what can they find there? The usual website stuff.
Well, before we close, tell us a little bit about the 7 medicines.
Okay. In my book, I can do you a flick through. Would you like a flick through? That might be fun. I don't know if that will work. Let's see.
I don't think it will, actually.
It's Anyway, that was an attempt. I don't think it did work. Sorry about that. The 7 medicines are slow body depth, relationship, pleasure, power, and potency. And they are a map, a pathway that will take you from mess into magic, from your current mess into magicalness, into the universe of deliciousness. And I guess I write with a hope inspiring and uplifting ideas and quotes from many other authors about these ideas. And there are, again, as you know, a feast of practical exercises, how to slow down, really.
Which is what people want. Don't just talk about it, show me how to do it.
Yeah. And someone else said recently that people are drowning in the mundane. And as we began our conversation, and I was listening to your music at the beginning, and of course what I've written, I hope, is, God, I was going to say a spark of the sacred. I thought, is that too big a thing to say?
Why? Why would it be too big? Claim it.
It's written from my heart. To those who would like to or need to read it, as I needed the guidance and support of these and other authors and teachers across the decades that I've been traveling. So it's written from my heart. It's what my heart knows and wants to share. And I think that, don't know how to say it, but I hope it transmits and reaches and lights and does what it needs to do.
That's a good hope to have. So now that you've found the joy of being an author, are you planning on writing more?
Oh yeah, I love writing. I really, really love writing. And in fact, this post-writing process of speaking about the book and even writing more has become even more in service, even more of delivering something. And I've got my hand outstretched, which you probably can't see, and there's a lot of heat in it. So yes, I think I probably will continue writing because I really love it, and something wants to be expressed, and I have ideas for further books, and we'll see. For the moment, this one, may it have its life in the world.
Yeah. And enjoy it. Julia Paulette Hollenbery, thank you for adding your 10 best spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Sandie. Pleasure speaking with you.
You're welcome. So The Healing Power of Pleasure, 7 Medicines for Rediscovering the Innate Joy of Being is published by Findhorn Press, / Inner Traditions. And you can find out more about Julia's work and her upcoming workshops at universeofdeliciousness.com. I don't know how anybody could forget that website name. And you can see all the videos in this series on the video page at the No BS Spiritual Book Club.com, where you can sign up to be the first to know who's coming up next. And while you're there, if you know you have a book in you but don't know where to start, click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others birth their books might help you birth yours. That brings us to the end of this week's show, which will also be available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Audible, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and all the best podcast platform sites. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back with you next week with another episode of the No BS Spiritual Book Club's 10 Best Spiritual Books interview series. Till then, it's goodbye from me.